Carl Obermann, welcome back to the China Current. In our first conversation, you spoke about your life in Texas and how you become an environmental photographer in China today. I read this beautiful essay that you wrote and illustrated with your picture of Sanjiangyuan in National Geographic. Sanjiangyuan, why is it so important?
Well, it's the source of the three rivers, right? So the Yellow and the Yangtze and the Mekong River all come from Sanjiangyuan, which provides water for not just most of China, but also Southeast Asia, right? But also it's the habitat of snow leopards. So it's the first national park, right? It's China's model for the future of how we see national parks in China.
3 times the size of Yellowstone.
Massive.
Massive.
I mean, really big, and much higher, like 5,000 meters. So it's pretty intense.
What does it feel like being there?
Just wild. I mean, it sounds simple to say wild, but it's an expanse. I mean, you can be sitting there so high up and just look, and it's almost the clouds are touching the ground because you're so high up, and just as far as you can see, it's just wild. There's no building, no human.
You're actually also an explorer. You spent years, 5 years and counting, going into parts of China that hardly anyone gets a glimpse of, let alone a pretty good taste for. What have you explored and what have you learned?
For me, I think I've most clearly learned the link between people and conservation. The fact that if you cannot do conservation, especially in China, without doing the people first. You cannot tell someone to conserve the land without solving the issue of their livelihood or their dinner or their children's jobs or school. So in China especially, while we talk about conservation and protecting these lands, most of the time it actually comes down to education and poverty relief.
What does China have to do with conservation and protection of the environment? Because so many people associate it for its urban centers and the great pollutions in cities like Beijing.
Yeah. Well, China as a nation, again, the diversity of biomes and ecosystems is massive. It's more than the US, in fact. So when we talk about conserving species, even like the snow leopards, China is critical that we protect these species. But also I think it provides a model for developing nations around the world that have large populations living close to wildlife that are still developing. Now we're seeing China's experience being exported to other places around the world as well. China had the goal of eliminating poverty in 2020, and they just announced that they did it. And so part of that has been relieving poverty of these people living in the reserves. And how they do it is actually a lot of times, for example, Sanjiangyuan, they have a one family, one ranger program where they hire one member per family to be a ranger for the national park. And so then they have a salary as a ranger, and they're involved with monitoring the land for science and being tour guides or watching for poaching, etc. Right? So they're finding ways to alleviate poverty by involving people in the national park.
Through this life that you've built for yourself, does it tell you more about the planet, or does it tell you more about humanity?
I think it shows me how you cannot disconnect people from nature, and we must heal that. I think many times the people living in poverty in these villages are much closer to nature than a lot of us. Conservation and development is finding the balance where we can coexist and we can experience each other. People can go and experience nature on nature's terms. And I think that is critical for the soul and development of humanity.